One night, Captain Kaz heard a whistle. After a while, an ancient colored man put in his appearance, and after considerable parleying on both sides, and when the merchant was satisfied that everything was safe, he let out a 150-pound pig, which he offered at a very reasonable price. In fact, a very extremely reasonable price. The offer was accepted and the money paid while the pig stood calmly by, giving grunts of satisfaction. The pig, after much squealing, was dropped in the hole. The black man disappeared in the darkness, and when the sun rose, the boat with its living freight was 20 miles away. It was worthwhile for anyone to see President Buchanan, for he was a noble, dignified-looking man, at least 6 feet and 2 inches high and in perfect proportion. Pick went up from the boat the morning we started, and with little Pick saw him off on the coach. The president had come by rail to Cumberland and stopped overnight at the Revere House. Pick knew he was a great man, that the President of the United States was the greatest man in the country. And later, after we had started, Captain Kaz said, "Pick, did you see the president?" "Yes, sir," he replied. "And what did you think of him?" Pick said. "Well, I'll tell you. I shouldn't want to tackle him." Before we left Williamsport, Captain Kaz got up a blackberry party, which included his daughter, Tommy, and myself. I followed an old stone wall, and in an out-of-way corner of a pasture found a considerable patch of vines. The small tin cup I had was soon filled, and the others had disappeared with the pails and were out of hearing. I took off my cap and lined it with leaves and picked it full 2 quarts or more. I was invited out to dine the next day, and we had blackberry pudding for dinner. On the 4th of July, the church that Captain Kaz's family attend had a picnic about 3 or 4 miles up the canal. A flat 40 or 50 feet long, used for transporting gravel for canal repairs, was improvised as a barge and was trimmed up with evergreens, flags, and banners. Seats of various kinds were placed on it, with 2 armchairs in the center for the minister and his wife. The Sabbath school marched over and filed on board. The old maids and matrons with the babies occupied the middle of the boat, and the young men and maidens took the outside seats, while the deacons and the Sabbath school officers patrolled the edges to see that no one fell overboard, for there was no railing. Someone loaned them an old white horse for motive power, and our boy Tommy held the place of honor, being delegated as driver, of which he felt very proud, and had spent most of the day before fitting a new cracker to his whip. After the first half mile, Tommy was called in to sample the popcorn and lemonade, while some other kid mounted the tow horse. To ensure perfect safety to the excursion, Captain Kaz held the tiller and piloted them to their journey's end. It would seem to be hardly worth the while to be so much trouble to do so short a distance, but then it was an hour or an hour and 1/2 journey, which would be equal to 25 or 30 miles by rail or excursion boat, and with a chance to see as much or more of the scenery, and with no danger of accident. Pick and his young children had their celebration with the members of Zion's Wesleyan First Colored Methodist Episcopal Church of Williamsport, while I spent the day alone in the boat, thinking over the Declarations of Independence, how all men, except Negroes, were made free and equal. One afternoon, I walked out on the Hagerstown Pike beyond Williamsport Village, where I found great numbers of tumblebugs rolling up their balls. In one place, I counted 125 in the space of a rod. They were of a different species from those I had seen in New England, being nearly round with the thin black wing covers, while the northern species are more angular in shape and have thicker wing covers, which are often rough in texture. All I saw that afternoon were of one species and were about 1/2 inch across and were making their balls out of horse manure found in the road. These beetles worked in pairs, although there were sometimes 3 at one ball, which was nearly round and from 5/8 to 3/4 of an inch in diameter, and after it was shaped, it was rolled to some place where it could be buried, for the roadbed was as hard as stone. Really, there is hardly any animal that shows more cunning, energy, perseverance, and neatness than the hog when he has his liberty. Everywhere in this part of the country, the hog has free range. Even in Washington, the hogs were at that time as common in the streets as dogs, and you could frequently find them asleep on the walk with their nose over the curbstone and their tail curled through the front yard fence. When a lady came along, she had her choice of punching him up with her parasol or going around through the mud or dust in the street. We do not often see them along the canal unless we stop to feed the mules. Then a hog was sure to appear. Even if it was miles from any habitation, they would seem to come up right out of the ground. I had more experience with them at Williamsport than any other place. The mules were picketed out by the side of a barn daytimes and at noon were fed with corn on the cob. I would carry out a bucket full of corn and put it in the manger before one pair. Not a hog would be in sight. I would then return to the boat and fill the bucket for the pair. By the time I got back, there would be a hog standing on his hind legs with one forefoot in the manger, eating the corn while the mules stood back and looked on. When I came up to the hog, he would turn his head and with a kind of merry twinkle in his eye at me, as much to say, "What are you going to do about it?" As long as I remained, they kept busy rooting around, turning over sticks and stones, but always had an eye on me and were ever ready to make a forage if opportunity should occur until the mules had eaten the last grain of corn. Then they disappeared as suddenly as they had appeared.